General Hospital will reveal about Vaughn made his first appearance on General Hospital on March 7, 2025, and quickly captured viewers' attention with his striking good looks, composed demeanor, and a quiet intensity that hinted at a deeper story. He immediately stood out as a mysterious figure, calculated, observant, and seemingly impenetrable. Assigned to oversee Josslyn's training at the WSB facility, Vaughn entered the canvas as a strict, no-nonsense mentor whose initial skepticism toward Josslyn created a palpable tension between them. From the very beginning, Vaughn questioned why someone like Josslyn, raised in luxury, protected by family wealth and influence, would voluntarily enter a world defined by danger, deception, and solitude. In his eyes, she didn't belong. She seemed too idealistic, too privileged to truly understand the sacrifices that came with the role of a WSB agent. But Josslyn wasn't intimidated. She met each challenge he presented with fierce determination, and over time, her grit and resilience began to dismantle the walls Vaughn had built around himself. During grueling sparring sessions, gruff lectures, and mind games designed to test her resolve, Vaughn watched as Josslyn pushed herself beyond her limits, often ignoring her own pain and exhaustion. One particular moment, when Vaughn noticed her swollen ankle after a fight, stood out. Instead of brushing it off as weakness, he advised her to ask for help when necessary, subtly revealing his protective instincts. Through these shared trials, their connection deepened in ways neither expected nor openly acknowledged. It was in the silences between their words, the lingering glances during drills, and the growing trust they extended to one another that something unspoken began to form, a fragile yet undeniable bond. Vaughn, despite his cool exterior, became a steady presence in Josslyn's journey. He challenged her mind and body but also began to admire her tenacity and heart. And though he tried to remain professional, the lines between mentor and something more began to blur. Josslyn, in turn, found herself drawn to the mystery that Vaughn represented, his strength, his silence, and the glimpses of vulnerability he tried so hard to hide. Yet, lurking beneath this slow-burning connection was a devastating truth neither of them saw coming. Vaughn is, in fact, the secret son of Jax, a reality that not even Vaughn is aware of. Having grown up in Australia, Vaughn lived his entire life oblivious to his true parentage. He never knew his father, never heard the names Carly or Josslyn, and had no reason to believe he was part of a powerful family on the other side of the world. His decision to join the WSB and move to the United States was nothing more than a career choice, or so he thought. Unbeknownst to him, fate was steering him directly into the orbit of his half-sister, Josslyn. Even more shocking is the fact that Jax has known the truth all along. For reasons unknown, he kept the existence of Vaughn a secret not just from Carly and Josslyn but from Vaughn himself. Perhaps it was guilt, fear, or an effort to protect all involved. Whatever the reason, the consequences of that decision are about to unravel everything. As Vaughn and Josslyn's relationship begins to toe the line between camaraderie and romance, the looming revelation threatens to turn their world upside down. What happens when Vaughn discovers he is Jax's son? Will he be able to forgive the man who kept him in the dark for so long? And how will Josslyn react when she realizes that the man she's beginning to fall for is, in fact, her half-brother? This tangled web of emotions, secrets, and identities adds an explosive layer to their storyline. It's no longer just about training to become a WSB agent, it's about confronting the past, redefining relationships, and navigating heartbreak in its most complex form. The moment of truth is inevitable, and when it arrives, it will force everyone involved to choose between loyalty and love, blood and betrayal, destiny and free will. As General Hospital continues to unfold this gripping arc, viewers are left wondering, will the bond between Vaughn and Josslyn survive the revelation? Or will their connection dissolve under the weight of a truth that was never meant to be discovered? One thing is certain, the story of Vaughn and Josslyn is just beginning, and it promises to be as emotional as it is unforgettable. Vaughn was far more than just a strict instructor during Josslyn's WSB training. He quietly became her steady support, a silent anchor in an environment designed to break even the most resilient spirits. Though his demeanor was often stern and unyielding, his actions spoke volumes. Behind every challenge he presented, there was a careful calculation not only to test Josslyn's skills but also to build her up, layer by layer, into someone who could survive the harsh reality of life as a WSB agent. Whether it was an intense combat simulation, psychological endurance drills, or even the polygraph test meant to evaluate her ability to remain composed under pressure, Vaughn was always there, observing, guiding, and pushing her to her limits. Yet, in those moments when Josslyn's resolve wavered, Vaughn's responses revealed a depth of empathy rarely seen in someone so guarded. He didn't scold or ridicule her when he noticed the swelling in her ankle after a rough training session. Instead, he quietly acknowledged her pain, urging her to accept help when she needed it, gently reminding her that true strength isn't just about physical endurance, it's also about vulnerability, about knowing when to rely on others. That subtle, unwavering presence did not go unnoticed by Josslyn. For someone who had grown up in a world of power, chaos, and shifting loyalties, Vaughn's quiet consistency began to mean more than she expected. His words lingered in her mind longer than they should have, and his silence between those words became something she sought rather than feared. There was a tenderness hidden beneath his stoic exterior, a sense that he understood the burdens she carried, even if he never said it aloud. As the days passed, the atmosphere between them began to shift. What had initially been a dynamic built on challenge and discipline evolved into something far more complex. It was in the small, almost imperceptible gestures, the way Vaughn would position himself just behind Josslyn during exercises, not to intimidate but to catch her if she faltered, the way his gaze would linger a moment too long after she completed a particularly difficult task, the way his voice softened slightly when speaking to her, even while delivering criticism. These weren't grand declarations, they were quiet signals, hidden between the lines of duty and restraint. Josslyn, in turn, began to see Vaughn differently. No longer just the man testing her limits, he became the one who silently believed in her, the one whose approval she unexpectedly craved. She started noticing the man beneath the uniform, the one who carried his own unspoken wounds, his own ghosts. In Vaughn, she saw not only a mentor, but a kindred spirit. Their shared silences became louder than words, and in those silences, something unspoken began to grow. There was never a moment of confession, no explicit acknowledgement of the shift occurring between them. But it was there, unmistakably present, in every passing glance, every breath held just a second too long, every training session where the intensity between them seemed to crackle with something far more powerful than adrenaline. It was the kind of connection neither had anticipated, the kind that crept in slowly and took root before either of them could stop it. And yet, the cruel irony of their growing closeness was that neither Vaughn nor Josslyn had any idea of the devastating truth that hung over them like a shadow. In another world, perhaps their bond would have been simple, a romance born of proximity and shared experience. But in General Hospital, nothing is ever quite so simple, and this relationship, born in secrecy and shaped in silence, may soon face a revelation that could unravel everything. The questions surrounding Vaughn's future go far beyond whether he has what it takes to become a true WSB agent. While his skills, intelligence, and unwavering focus suggest he has the makings of an elite operative, the far more pressing question lies not in his ability to serve the agency, but in what will happen when the truth about his identity comes to light. What will become of Vaughn when he discovers that he is not just a nameless recruit working his way through the system, but the long-lost son of Jax, a secret child hidden from both himself and the world? The revelation of Vaughn's lineage promises to shake the very foundation of everything he thought he knew about his life. Raised in Australia, far from the tumultuous lives of the people in Port Charles, Vaughn never imagined that his path would cross with Josslyn's in such an intimate and meaningful way. Their connection, born in the crucible of WSB training, now threatens to unravel under the weight of a truth neither of them could have seen coming. How do you process learning that the person you're beginning to care for is your half-sibling? And more than that, how do you move forward from something that should never have happened? For Josslyn, the emotional fallout may be even more devastating. Discovering that Vaughn is not only the man who challenged her, supported her, and possibly stirred feelings she never expected, but also her brother, would be an emotional blow of unimaginable proportions. Her sense of identity, already tested by the demands of WSB training, would be thrown into chaos. And in the midst of that chaos looms an even bigger question: can she forgive her father for hiding the truth from her? Jax's decision to keep Vaughn's existence a secret may have been born from fear, shame, or a misguided attempt to protect his loved ones. But no matter the motivation, his silence has created a storm of unintended consequences. He robbed Vaughn of the opportunity to know who he truly was, and he robbed Josslyn of the chance to understand her family in its entirety. His choices, no matter how well-intentioned, have now placed both of his children on a collision course with pain, confusion, and betrayal. The emotional impact of this secret threatens to reach far beyond Vaughn and Josslyn. Carly, too, will be forced to reckon with the realization that her partner in parenting concealed such a monumental truth. The family as a whole will be forced to confront decades of unresolved history and reckon with how many lives have been shaped, and possibly scarred, by one man's silence. And then, of course, there is the question of what becomes of the bond between Vaughn and Josslyn. What began as mutual respect evolved into trust, and perhaps even the early stirrings of love. Can that bond survive the weight of this revelation? Can two people who were drawn to each other under false assumptions rebuild their relationship on new, more painful truths? Or will this shocking discovery be the end of whatever could have been between them? Perhaps the cruelest irony of all is that their connection was real. It wasn't built on manipulation or deceit, it was forged in the fire of shared struggle, personal growth, and quiet understanding. But now, that connection is tainted by a truth that neither of them had control over, a legacy of silence and denial passed down from a previous generation. As General Hospital moves deeper into this explosive storyline, the stakes grow higher with each passing moment. This is no longer just a story about espionage and WSB missions. It is a story about identity, family, forgiveness, and the complexity of human emotion. Vaughn's journey is no longer simply about proving himself as an agent. It is about discovering who he truly is, confronting a father he never knew, and choosing whether to walk away from the pain or find a way to build something new from the ruins of a shattered truth. And for Josslyn, the choice will be just as difficult. Will she hold on to the bitterness of betrayal, or will she open her heart to a brother she never knew she needed? Will their connection find new meaning within the truth, or will it be forever buried, another casualty of secrets kept too long? Only time will tell whether this fractured family can be pieced back together, or whether the past will succeed in tearing them apart forever. In the wake of mounting tension and the growing emotional storms surrounding Vaughn and Josslyn, Jax finally made the decision he had avoided for years. The weight of the secret he had carried was no longer something he could outrun, not from the far corners of Australia, not through the silence he had used to shield himself and others. As the truth began to teeter on the edge of exposure, Jax knew he could no longer hide. With a heavy heart and a plane ticket in hand, he returned to Port Charles, ready to face the consequences of a past he had kept buried for far too long. His arrival was quiet but deliberate, void of the fanfare or charm he often carried with him. There was no time for pleasantries. Jax was a man on a mission, not for business, not for diplomacy, but for redemption. He had come to tell the truth, not only to Josslyn, the daughter he had raised and cherished, but to Vaughn, the son he had never claimed, never embraced, and never allowed to know the truth of his existence. In his mind, Jax had played out the conversation 1,000 times, the shocked expressions, the heartbreak, the anger, the disbelief. He knew there was no version of this revelation that would come without pain. But the alternative, continuing to lie, to let his children spiral unknowingly toward disaster, was no longer an option he could justify. For Josslyn, the moment her father asked to speak with her alone was already laced with unease. She sensed something deeper than a casual visit. And as he began to reveal the truth, that Vaughn was not just her WSB training partner, not just the man she had grown to admire and feel a connection with, but her half-brother, her world seemed to collapse in on itself. Every moment, every memory between her and Vaughn replayed in her mind, now drenched in the weight of something forbidden, something irreversible. Vaughn, when confronted with the truth, stood in stunned silence. It wasn't just about the shock of discovering who his father was, it was the emotional whiplash of realizing that his entire life had been shaped by someone else's decisions, someone else's lies. The man he never knew had decided his fate long before he could even begin to understand it. Jax, standing between his two children, had no excuses, only an explanation. He spoke of regret, of youth, of mistakes made in the shadows of fear. He confessed to a past relationship that had resulted in Vaughn's birth, and how circumstances, pride, and uncertainty led him to make a choice he now viewed as the greatest failure of his life. He admitted to watching Vaughn from afar for years, never having the courage to step forward, always convincing himself that it was better this way. But now, as the truth stood exposed between them, Jax made a plea, not for forgiveness, but for understanding. He didn't expect to be absolved, and he knew that rebuilding trust would take more than words. He only hoped that, by finally speaking the truth, he could stop the damage from spreading further. For Vaughn and Josslyn, the road ahead was uncertain. The revelation had turned their lives upside down, and the emotions swirling within them, grief, anger, confusion, betrayal, could not be resolved in a single conversation. And yet, for the first time, they had clarity. They had the truth. What they did with it was now entirely their own decision. Jax's return didn't fix everything, but it was a beginning. A beginning marked not by lies, but by raw honesty. And in the world of General Hospital, where secrets often destroy lives, perhaps this truth, however painful, could be the first step toward healing. As Vaughn continued to stand beside Josslyn through the grueling and unforgiving challenges of WSB training, the tension on General Hospital simmered with anticipation. Each mission, each obstacle, and each quiet exchange between the two only deepened the connection they were building, an unspoken bond forged not only through physical endurance but through trust, loyalty, and emotional resilience. Together, they faced adversity, pushing each other harder, growing stronger both as individuals and as a team. But what neither of them realized was that the greatest challenge still lay ahead, not in the field, not on the battlefield, but within the truth of who they really were. The audience, well aware of the secret hovering above them like a storm cloud, watched breathlessly as the narrative unfolded. Vaughn and Josslyn, unaware of their shared bloodline, continued to move towards something deeper, something dangerously close to intimacy. It wasn't just their partnership as agent and trainee that was evolving, it was something far more personal, far more vulnerable. Their connection was no longer just about loyalty and discipline, it was about longing, about the need to be understood in a world where deception was a necessity and trust was a rare currency. But everything was about to change. The revelation that Vaughn was not merely a fellow trainee, not simply a mysterious presence in Josslyn's life, but her half-brother, a child Jax fathered and kept hidden, was poised to shatter everything. The truth, long buried beneath layers of guilt and silence, had begun to rise to the surface. And when it did, it would not only redefine their relationship, it would challenge the very foundation of their identities. Who were they, really, if not two strangers brought together by fate, but two siblings unknowingly entangled in a bond that crossed every boundary they thought they understood? For the viewers of General Hospital, this wasn't just a shocking plot twist, it was the kind of emotional upheaval that reshapes entire storylines. The fallout from such a revelation would ripple outward, affecting not just Vaughn and Josslyn, but Jax, Carly, and everyone connected to their world. Loyalties would be tested. Hearts would break. Relationships would fracture and be forced to rebuild, if they could survive the truth at all. This was no ordinary twist. It was the kind of truth powerful enough to change everything, every feeling, every decision, and every step toward the future that Vaughn and Josslyn had imagined. A future that now hung in the balance, suspended between a past full of secrets and a destiny no one could have predicted.